The first time I met Gabriel, I didn't think much of him. He was charming, yes, but in the way you'd expect from someone Alexander described as a real go-getter at work. He had that easy smile, the kind that made you feel like you were the most important person in the room, even if only for a moment. When Alexander suggested inviting him over for dinner, I didn't see the harm. After all, it was just one evening. How much could it really change? But as the night unfolded, something about Gabriel's presence began to unsettle me. It wasn't anything obvious, not at first. Just little things. The way his gaze lingered on me a beat too long when he thought no one was looking. The way his laughter always seemed to be directed at me, even when Alexander was the one telling the joke. He'd lean in slightly when he spoke, his voice dropping to a low, intimate tone that made my skin prickle in a way I couldn't quite name. "Sophia, you're just as radiant as Alexander described," he said during dessert, his eyes locked on mine. I forced a polite smile, but his words felt heavy, like they carried a meaning I wasn't supposed to understand. Alexander chuckled beside me, oblivious, and for a moment, I felt the faintest flicker of unease. By the end of the evening, that unease had grown into something more. As Gabriel stood to leave, he took my hand in his, holding it just a fraction longer than necessary. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Sophia," he said, his voice smooth, almost like a caress. I pulled my hand away quickly, my cheeks burning, and muttered something about it being nice to meet him too. But the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. Later, as I helped Alexander clear the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Gabriel seems interesting," I said carefully, hoping to gauge his reaction. Alexander shrugged, stacking plates with his usual efficiency. "He's a smooth talker, but he's good at what he does." "Why? Did something seem off to you?" I hesitated, unsure how to put my discomfort into words. "Not exactly. He was just intense, I guess." Alexander laughed, brushing off my concern. "That's just Gabriel. He's always like that. Don't let it get to you." But it did get to me. Over the next few days, I found myself replaying the evening in my mind, dissecting every interaction, every gesture. Was I reading too much into it? Was I just being paranoid? The questions gnawed at me, but I didn't know how to bring it up without sounding like I was overreacting. Then, the text came. It was late, and Alexander was already asleep. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and when I saw the name on the screen, my heart skipped a beat. "Unknown number. Sophia, it's Gabriel." I hope it's not too forward of me to reach out, but I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation the other night. "You're truly captivating." I stared at the message, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed out a response. "Me, this is my personal number. How did you get it?" His reply came almost instantly. "Gabriel, Alexander gave it to me. Said you'd be happy to help me settle into the neighborhood. I was hoping we could meet sometime. Maybe for coffee?" My stomach clenched. This wasn't right. Why would Alexander give him my number without telling me? And why did Gabriel feel the need to reach out to me privately? I glanced at Alexander, sleeping soundly beside me, and felt a pang of guilt. Should I tell him? Or would that just create unnecessary tension? The next morning, I decided to confront Gabriel directly. I couldn't let this continue. Me. "Gabriel, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think meeting one-on-one is appropriate. I'm sure Alexander would be happy to help you settle in." His response was immediate. "Gabriel, I understand, but I was hoping to get to know you better. Alexander is a great colleague, but you're something else entirely." The boldness of his words left me speechless. My hands shook as I typed out a reply, but before I could hit send, Alexander walked into the kitchen, his tie already loosened for work. "Everything okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed as he took in my expression. I hesitated, the weight of Gabriel's message pressing down on me. I need to talk to you about something." Alexander tilted his head, his gaze softening as he stepped closer. "What's going on, Sophia? You look like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard, the words sticking in my throat. How could I even begin to explain this without sounding paranoid? Or worse, like I was reading into something that wasn't there? But the text on my phone burned into my memory, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to say something. "It's Gabriel," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "Last night, after dinner, he texted me. It was late, and it didn't feel right." Alexander's brow furrowed, and he leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing his arms. "What do you mean? What did he say?" I hesitated, then unlocked my phone and handed it to him. My heart pounded as he scanned the screen, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion, and then to something darker. His jaw tightened, and he handed the phone back to me without a word. "Sophia," he said finally, his tone measured, but with an edge I hadn't heard before. "This is inappropriate." "I know," I said quickly, relief washing over me that he wasn't dismissing it. I didn't know how to handle it, but I knew I had to tell you. I didn't want to make him uncomfortable at work or anything, but I couldn't just ignore it. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, his eyes distant as he processed what he'd read. "I'll talk to him. This isn't okay. He crossed a line, and it's not something I'm going to let slide." I nodded, grateful for his support, but still uneasy. "I don't want to cause trouble for you at work. I know he's your colleague, and I don't want to make things difficult." "Sophia," he said firmly, stepping closer and cupping my face in his hand. "You're my wife. This is my problem. And it's not just about work, it's about you feeling safe. I'll handle it." The weight of his words settled over me, and I leaned into his touch, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. I didn't want to disrupt his professional relationships, but the thought of Alexander standing up for me made me feel more secure than I had in days. Later that evening, I was curled up on the couch with a book, trying to distract myself from the lingering tension of the morning. Alexander had left for work, assuring me he'd speak to Gabriel, but I couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that clung to me. The sound of my phone buzzing on the coffee table startled me, and I glanced at the screen. My stomach dropped when I saw Gabriel's name. "Gabriel, I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable last night. I didn't mean to. I wanted to get to know you better. You seem like someone worth knowing." I stared at the message, torn between annoyance and unease. It felt like he was trying to backtrack, but the underlying tone still felt off. Before I could decide how to respond, or if I even should, another message popped up. "Gabriel, maybe we could meet for coffee sometime? Just to clear the air. I'd hate for there to be any misunderstanding." My fingers hovered over the screen, my heart racing. The last thing I wanted was to meet him alone, but I also didn't want to escalate things further. Before I could reply, a third message came through. "Gabriel, or is that too much to ask? I'm just trying to make amends." The manipulative undertone of his words made my skin crawl. It was like he was trying to twist things to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm as I typed out a response. I appreciate the apology, but I think it's best if we keep things professional. I'm sure you understand." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, setting the phone down and exhaling slowly. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. Alexander was quieter than usual, and I could tell the conversation with Gabriel had left him unsettled. He didn't offer many details, but the way he snapped his laptop shut mid-call or avoided bringing up work altogether spoke volumes. One evening, as we sat down to dinner, he finally broke the silence. "I talked to HR today," he said abruptly, his tone clipped. "I filed a formal complaint about Gabriel." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "You did? What did they say?" He sighed, running a hand over his face. "They're looking into it. They'll need to talk to you, too, since you're involved. But I'm not letting this go, Sophia. What he did wasn't okay, and I'm not going to let him get away with it." I nodded, a mix of gratitude and anxiety swirling inside me. I didn't want to deal with the fallout, but I also knew it was necessary. Still, the thought of facing Gabriel again, even in a professional setting, made my stomach churn. A few days later, I found myself sitting in a small conference room at Alexander's office, waiting for the HR representative to arrive. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The door opened, and I looked up, expecting to see the HR rep. Instead, Gabriel walked in, his easy smile plastered across his face. "Sophia," he said smoothly, his tone dripping with false warmth. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." I stiffened, my heart pounding. "Gabriel, I'm here for the HR meeting. I thought." He waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be." His gaze lingered on me, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something about the way he looked at me, like he was daring me to say something to challenge him. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet his eyes. This isn't a misunderstanding, Gabriel. Your behavior, it wasn't appropriate. And I'm not going to pretend it was. His smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered, leaning casually against the table. Sophia, I think you're overreacting. I just wanted to be friendly. Isn't that what colleagues do? His words were calm, almost soothing, but there was a sharpness beneath them that made my stomach twist. I opened my mouth to respond, but the door opened again and the HR representative walked in, cutting off the conversation. Gabriel's smile widened, but there was a glint in his eyes that told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The HR representative, a poised woman in her late 40s with a clipboard in hand, took her seat across from Gabriel and me. Her presence was calming, yet professional, and I felt a small measure of relief that she was here to mediate. Gabriel, however, seemed unbothered, his easy smile still plastered across his face as if we were just having a casual chat. Thank you both for coming, she began, setting the clipboard down. I've been briefed on the situation, but I'd like to hear from each of you to ensure I have a clear understanding. I straightened in my seat, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Gabriel's behavior has made me uncomfortable, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. He sent me messages that felt inappropriate, and during our dinner, his comments and actions crossed a line. Gabriel chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair as if I'd just told a mildly amusing joke. Sophia, I think you're misinterpreting my intentions. I was just trying to be friendly. Maybe I came on too strong, but I meant no harm. The HR representative's expression remained neutral, but I noticed the slight furrow of her brow as she turned to him. Gabriel, can you elaborate on what you mean by friendly? From the text provided, it seems your communication was personal rather than professional. He shrugged, his smile never wavering. I was just being myself. Maybe I overstepped a bit, but I didn't mean any offense. I thought we were getting along well, Sophia. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. The apology felt hollow, and I couldn't help but feel like he was mocking me. He's not sorry, I thought. He's just playing the part. I glanced at the HR representative, hoping she could see through his charm. Sophia, how did Alexander react when you told him about this? She asked, her tone gentle but probing. He was supportive, I replied quickly. He filed the complaint because he felt Gabriel's behavior was unacceptable. Her nod was understanding, but Gabriel's smile faltered for the briefest moment. I could see the irritation flash in his eyes before he schooled his expression back into that casual, charming mask. Well, it seems there's been a misunderstanding, Gabriel said smoothly. I'll be more mindful in the future. I don't want to cause any trouble. The HR representative exchanged a glance between us before speaking. Gabriel, while it's good that you're willing to adjust your behavior, this situation has created a significant issue. A formal complaint has been filed, and we'll need to address this through the proper channels. His jaw tightened, but he kept his tone light. Of course. I completely understand. The meeting concluded with the HR representative outlining the next steps, including a formal review and potential consequences for Gabriel. As we stood to leave, Gabriel shot me a look that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't anger. It was something far more unsettling, like a predator sizing up its prey. Outside the office, I quickened my pace, eager to put distance between us. But Gabriel caught up to me easily, his stride unhurried. Sophia, he called, his voice smooth but low. Can we talk? I stopped, turning to face him with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. I think we've said enough. His smile was faint, almost rueful. I just want to clear the air. I didn't mean to cause you so much discomfort. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I crossed my arms, my guard firmly in place. Gabriel, you know what you're doing. Don't pretend this is some innocent misunderstanding. He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto mine. You're a fascinating woman, Sophia. I'm not going to deny that. But I'm not the villain here. I'm just someone who's attracted to you. Is that really such a crime? My breath hitched, and I took a step back, but he closed the distance again, his presence overwhelming. I'm married, I said firmly, though my voice trembled slightly. That doesn't mean you're out of reach, he murmured, his tone dangerously soft. I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. but I think there's something here, something real. Don't you feel it? My heart pounded as I searched for the right words, but before I could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the tension. Sophia? Is everything okay? I turned to see him striding toward us, his expression a mix of concern and suspicion. Gabriel stepped back, his smile returning as if nothing had happened. Everything's fine, Gabriel said smoothly. Just clearing the air after our meeting. Alexander's eyes narrowed, but he didn't press further. Instead, he took my arm gently, his touch grounding me. Let's go. I don't want you to be late for your appointment. As we walked away, I could feel Gabriel's gaze on my back, lingering like a shadow. I didn't dare look back, but I could almost hear his unspoken words hanging in the air. This isn't over. Later that evening, as Alexander and I sat together on the couch, the weight of the day pressed heavily on my shoulders. He'd been quiet since the encounter with Gabriel, and I could tell something was bothering him. What's on your mind? I asked, breaking the silence. He hesitated, his fingers absently tracing patterns on the armrest. I'm worried, Sophia. Gabriel, he's not backing down. I don't like the way he looks at you. It's like he's daring me to do something. I leaned my head on his shoulder, seeking comfort. I'm handling it. I won't let him get to me. But you shouldn't have to, he said, his voice firm. I'm your husband. It's my job to protect you. I lifted my head to meet his gaze, seeing the determination in his eyes. We're a team, Alexander. We'll get through this together. He nodded, but the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. I'm going to escalate this. I won't let him get away with this. The next day, as I was leaving the grocery store, I saw Gabriel leaning against his car, waiting. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay calm. He straightened as I approached, his smile as charming as ever. Sophia, he said, his voice warm. Fancy running into you here. What do you want, Gabriel? I asked, my tone clipped. He stepped closer, his eyes locked onto mine. I just wanted to see you. You've been on my mind, Sophia. More than you realize. I took a deep breath, refusing to let him intimidate me. This needs to stop. You're crossing lines, and I'm not going to let you continue. His smile faltered, and for the first time, I saw a flash of frustration in his eyes. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm not a bad guy, Sophia. I just want a chance. And I don't want you, I said firmly, my voice carrying a strength I didn't know I had. Leave me alone, Gabriel. This is your last warning. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. But as I watched him go, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, that Gabriel wasn't the type to give up so easily. The next few days passed in a strange haze of unease. I hadn't heard from Gabriel since the confrontation at the grocery store, but his absence didn't bring me peace. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm, the kind of quiet that makes your skin prickle with anticipation. Alexander, for his part, seemed more focused than ever, burying himself in work as if it were his only lifeline. I tried to shake off the tension, but it clung to me like a second skin. It was Thursday evening when the first sign of trouble appeared. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when my phone buzzed on the counter. My heart dropped when I saw the name on the screen. Gabriel. My fingers hesitated over the screen, torn between curiosity and dread. Finally, I picked it up. Sophia, we need to talk. His voice was calm, almost too calm, and it sent a chill down my spine. There's nothing to talk about, Gabriel, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. I've made myself clear. You have, he admitted, his tone softening. But I think you've misunderstood me. I'm not trying to hurt you. I want you to see things from my perspective. I don't care about your perspective, I shot back, my grip tightening on the phone. You've crossed lines. Repeatedly. And I'm done entertaining this. There was a pause on the other end, and when he spoke again, his voice had shifted. You're making a mistake, Sophia. You don't know what you're turning away. I'm not the villain here. You sure act like one, I said, my voice sharp. Leave me alone, Gabriel. This is the last time I'm saying it. I ended the call before he could respond, my hands trembling slightly. I set the phone down and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But the tension didn't leave. Instead, it settled deeper into my bones. The sound of the front door opening made me jump. Alexander walked in, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but his face lit up when he saw me. "Hey, beautiful," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Something smells amazing." I forced a smile, pushing the call with Gabriel to the back of my mind. "Just dinner. How was your day?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Long meetings all day, but it's better now that I'm home." I nodded, turning back to the vegetables. But my mind wasn't on dinner anymore. It was on Gabriel, on the way his voice had sounded, on the way he'd said, "You're making a mistake." Later that evening, after dinner, Alexander and I sat on the couch, his arm draped over my shoulders. We were supposed to be watching a movie, but neither of us was really paying attention. I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me, and I knew I needed to talk to him about the call. But I didn't know how to bring it up without making him worry, or worse, without escalating things further. "Alexander," I said finally, my voice soft. "Gabriel called me earlier." He tensed beside me, his arm tightening around my shoulders. "What did he want?" "To talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He said I've misunderstood him, that he's not trying to hurt me." Alexander was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "He doesn't get to decide what's hurtful. You've told him to back off, and he's not listening." "I know," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But I don't know what to do." "He's not going to stop, is he?" Alexander exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "No," he said, his voice firm. "He's not. Which is why we're going to handle this together." I nodded, leaning into him, but the worry didn't leave. Because I knew Gabriel, and I knew that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Alexander left for work early, his expression grim. I knew he was planning to talk to HR again, to escalate things further, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be enough. Gabriel was too determined, too skilled at playing the game. And I was starting to wonder if there was any way out of this that didn't end in disaster. I was still lost in thought when my phone buzzed again. My stomach dropped when I saw the text. "Sophia, we need to talk. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I didn't respond. I couldn't. But the message was a stark reminder that Gabriel wasn't going to let this go. Not without a fight. Later that afternoon, I decided to go for a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. I grabbed my coat and headed out, the crisp autumn air biting at my cheeks. I walked aimlessly, letting my feet carry me wherever they wanted to go. But no matter how far I walked, I couldn't escape the unease that clung to me. It was as I was turning the corner near the park that I saw him. Gabriel was leaning against a lamppost, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm but intense. My heart skipped a beat, and I stopped in my tracks. "Sophia," he said, his voice carrying a note of relief as if he'd been waiting for me. "I'm glad I ran into you." I took a step back, my pulse racing. "What are you doing here?" His smile was slow, almost predatory. "I needed to see you. We need to finish our conversation." "There's nothing left to say," I said, my voice firm, but inside, I was trembling. He stepped closer, his eyes locking on mine. "You're wrong. There's still so much to say. So much you don't understand." "I understand enough," I said, my voice rising. "You need to leave me alone, Gabriel." "I'm serious." He tilted his head, his smile never wavering. "And what if I don't? What if I'm not ready to walk away?" My breath caught, and I took another step back, but he matched it, closing the distance between us. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but he was too close, too focused. "You're not going to win this," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't." His smile widened, and he leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Watch me."